Hi everyone. It's been quite a week. I've been receiving texts and emails from a lot of my clients this week. So I thought I'd send out a video, and I've done it purposely today because I wanted to, wait for all the noise to die down so you can get a clear understanding of what we've seen and what the banks are telling us. So I sat in on a webinar with the head of the chief economist of NAB on Wednesday, and the consensus from them is much ado about nothing for the first 2 or 3 years. They're not expecting to see any sort of seismic shifts, and they're not, they're not telling us that they are, even if they are. But one of the things that was really interesting, which I would tend to agree with, that the chief economist commented on, was that she understood that the government is trying to shift investment capital towards new builds because that generates jobs, etc. However, as she said, and I've spoken to builders as well, she said if you speak to any builders, they're going to tell you that they're not making money. There's no margin in building anymore, or the margin is very small, and it's just not worth the risk. There's a lack of skills because a lot of the tradies are working on big government infrastructure projects because that's where the money's at. You know, there's been an increase obviously in costs, not only on the labor side, but obviously in everything it takes to build, right? So timber, steel, and let's not even get into the Strait of Hormuz and that debacle. So who's going to build? That's the question. And where are all these homes going to come from? So, and just a side note for anyone who is monitoring the build to rent industry, the government really hasn't, they kind of buried it in the budget, but there's a lot of incentives for large companies to build large towers that they can then sell to super funds. And if anyone was watching the market, you'll see that on Wednesday, Stockland's and Mirvac's shares went up off the back of the budget. And that's because they're heavily involved in the build to rent sector. And if anyone is wondering what that is, that's basically where companies build these huge towers of apartments purely for the motivation of renting out each apartment. And then what the government's doing is it's giving them incentives to keep those apartments for about 10-15 years, and then they basically sell them. So anyway, so what should you be doing as a property owner / investor? My commentary around that is simply that, with everything in life, you should be really concentrating on buying quality over quantity. Soaring Financial, we manage about 250 million loans. And as you can appreciate, to get to that figure, you have to see a lot of assets and liabilities positions of people. And one of the common things that I see is people who have multiple properties. Let's say they've got 4, at least 2 of them are crap and 2 of them are good. Now, what that tends to do is it takes a lot of stock out of the market, and first-time buyers and people like that can't get in. Right? Because they can't get in, they can't, pay down that debt and build equity. And then you've got these investors who are just holding on to them because they don't want to admit that they're not making money off them. So they tend to hold them for 5, 6, 7 years until they start to see some sort of return. And that doesn't help the market. So I think the government is probably trying to stop people from doing that moving forward. And that's why a lot of these tax incentives are now being taken out. So that's pretty much what I would be saying is, if you're looking to buy, like anything, make sure you're buying something good. Don't just buy something crap because it's cheap, because I think you're going to find that those days are gone. The days of that being having some sort of financial benefit to you is it's just not going to be there anymore, which I, to be honest, don't have an issue with. I think that people should be buying things because they're going to add value, not just because they want to take those chips off the table, right? And put them next to them. There's never, we need to move away as a society from being an economy of property flippers. It's never going to end well. And Canada and New Zealand are a good example of that. And the government doesn't want us to end up like Canada or New Zealand. So if you have any questions, please feel free to book in a time with me. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you and do a bit of a deep dive on some data. I've got some really interesting stats around mortgage stress suburbs all across Australia. If you want that report, please feel free to message me and I'll send that over to you. As always, I hope you're all well. And please reach out if you've got any questions. Thanks.